Welcome back to Personalization Outbreak Podcast, a place where we have real conversations about the changing world of work. Now, in today's episode, we're going to be discussing the new rules of marketing and how they can be applied to your business. Now, a lot has changed in the world of marketing over the past few years. And if you're not keeping up with these changes, you're going to be left behind. So, in this episode, we're going to be discussing what those changes are and how you could apply them to your business. Now, our guest today is David Meerman Scott. He's an internationally acclaimed business strategist, entrepreneur, and advisor to emerging companies. He's a Wall Street Journal bestselling author of 10 previous books, including The New Rules of Marketing and PR, Fanocracy, and The New Rules of Sales and Service. Now, the rules of marketing are changing all the time, so it's important that you keep up with what's going on. So sit back and relax while we break it all down for you. Now, before we get started, please click the like button below, share it with your colleagues, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and social media at Glenn Yopes. Let's get started. The 2022 season of Personalization Outbreak Podcast is brought to you by City of Hope, a world leader in the research and treatment of cancer, diabetes, and other life-threatening diseases. City of Hope has been ranked among the nation's best hospitals in cancer by U.S. News and World Report for over a decade. Learn more about City of Hope at cityofhope.org. You are listening to Personalization Outbreak, a podcast about the collapse of traditional corporate standards in today's more personalized world. I'm Glenn Yopes. I'm a leadership strategist, author, contributor to Forbes, and founder of the Leadership in the Age of Personalization movement. On this show, I'm interviewing executives across multiple sectors to find out how the balance between standardization and personalization can exist. Welcome to the show, David. Great to have you.
Hey, thanks so much, Glenn. It's great to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
Excellent. So now, before we get started, there is a fun fact, Dave, I'd like to explore with you for just a minute.
Sure.
You have attended over 860 rock concerts.
Yes.
What inspired your fascination with rock music and concerts?
This is true, and it's also super geeky that I know the number. I started going when I was 15 years old, and it just became the thing that I absolutely loved. I lived in Connecticut, and my parents, I don't know why they did, but they let me and my 15-year-old friends get on a train, travel an hour to Grand Central Station, and then walk to Madison Square Garden or to the Palladium or to the Ritz or to these other venues that we went to. And I absolutely loved it. I was like, wow, this is like such a super cool thing to do. And I collected my ticket stubs. I saved them. So I knew what shows I had been to based on the ticket stubs. And then roughly 30 years ago, when the first version of a spreadsheet software came out, I then started to catalog my shows. And I've kept that up to the point that, every time I go to a show, I write it down. And in fact, as we're recording this, 2 days from now, I'll be in Boulder, Colorado for 2 Dead & Company shows. I've been to 87 Grateful Dead concerts, which is why there's a Grateful Dead logo over my shoulder. And I wrote a book called Marketing Lessons from the Grateful Dead. I love the idea of understanding fandom from the perspective of a fan, and then figuring out how we can grow fans of any business. And I've spent the last couple decades of my life trying to work on that project. And I know you're a fan of the idea of building fans, so I'm excited for this conversation, Glenn.
Well, thank you, David. I didn't mean to interrupt, but clearly you've done that recently with your most recent Wall Street Journal bestseller, Fanocracy. And before we go into what that means, you've shared with me, David, that people gravitate towards those people that have an intense passion about something.
Yes.
What is Fanocracy, and how can a company embrace it to start a movement?
So Fanocracy, as I look at it, is the idea of humanizing business. because all humans, every one of us, you, me, everyone listening in, is hardwired to want to be part of a tribe of like-minded people. Because when we're with our tribe of like-minded people, we feel safe and comfortable, which is why I'm so excited to be going to a Grateful Dead show in 2 days, because those are my people. I've been there more than 80 times. And I can be super comfortable in that space, in that venue, and with the people that I'm familiar with. Even if I've never met them, I can turn to somebody and say, hey, what do you think they're going to play tonight? Hey, that was a great set. I wonder what they're going to do the second set. And so few businesses focus on this idea of creating a tribe of like-minded people. And I wrote Fanocracy actually with my daughter, Reiko. She's now 29, but when we first started working on the project, she was 24 years old. And we looked at all kinds of products and services. So for example, we found an automobile insurance company. Now, Glenn, let me ask you, do you love automobile insurance?
Well, most people, I just know that I need it.
Yeah, well, that's it. Most people, it's something that they don't like to buy. It's expensive. And furthermore, the only time that you need to use the product is if you've crashed your car, which is no fun at all. Hagerty Insurance has built a tribe of like-minded people. They've built fans, got an amazing YouTube channel. They do classic car auto insurance. They go to classic car shows around the country, and they're there. They're meeting with people. They're talking with them. They have a database of the prices of classic cars of practically any model and make out there, and they provide that free of charge for people so they can know how much their classic car is worth, whether they're a client or not. They've got a drivers club with 650,000 members. They've actually created a fanocracy out of a business people hate to buy, which is auto insurance. They're number one for classic car insurance in the whole world. They just went public at the end of the year on the stock exchange, doing fabulously well. Contrast that with most automobile insurance companies. They either try to become the low-cost provider, yeah, we're cheaper than everyone else, or they spend more money in ads than everybody else, with little lizards or geckos or whatever the heck they are. That doesn't work the same way that building fans, creating a human connection works.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, David. I mean, basically what you've said is moving from tradition to transformation, moving from transaction to something that's more human and that people can connect with.
Right.
So it seems to me as if they've built this movement by offering services that connect not just with people's heads, but with their hearts.
Yeah, right. It's the word you use, passion, because passion is infectious. And what's really interesting is what Hagerty was able to do was tap into the passion that collectors of classic cars have for their vehicles and for other collectors of classic cars. They tapped into that passion. I've just talked about how I'm passionate about rock concerts. I've got a Grateful Dead logo over my shoulder here. And the idea of sharing your passion, whatever you're passionate for, a sport you like to play, I'm a surfer. I love to surf. A sports team that you like to root for, an author that you enjoy, fly fishing, or whatever it is that you love to do. Sharing that passion makes you an interesting person. Yet what most people do in the business world, and we all see this, is they've got their passions over here. My family and my friends and my passions. That's a bucket that I don't share in business. And maybe they put it on Facebook. And then over here on LinkedIn, they're super boring and it's all about business. And it's like, oh my God. But if you share what you're passionate about, which is why I've got Grateful Dead, I've got my surfboard over here, I've got a model of the Apollo lunar Saturn V rocket. I'm a huge passionate fan of the NASA Apollo program. When you share what you're passionate about, people have something to relate to, yet so few business people share what they're passionate about. And, you talk a ton about personalization, Glenn. part of personalization is who you are as a person. Let me give you a little story. I mentioned my co-author in our book, Fanocracy, is my daughter, Reiko. And when we were working on the project, she was in medical school. She's now a third-year resident in emergency medicine at Boston Medical Center. She started her residency, literally, they graduated her early so that she could go into the hospital at the very beginning of the pandemic. Now, imagine you're in the emergency department for some kind of illness, you're in a car accident or whatever it was, and you're sick with COVID or whatever it might be. And the doctor comes in, my daughter in this case, she's head to toe in personal protective gear, PPE. She's got glasses, she's got a mask, she's got a hat over her hair, she's got gloves, she's got clothing over every bit of her body. The only thing you can see is a little bit of her eyes in front of behind the face mask. That's scary. It's like an alien coming in. But what she realized is if she wears a couple of pins of the things that she loves, or even, and she got permission from the hospital, to wear a sweatshirt of, she loves K-pop, she loves Harry Potter, and she loves the Boston Bruins. So she'll wear a Boston Bruins sweatshirt and then maybe a K-pop or a Harry Potter pin. Sometimes she wears a rainbow pin for pride. And people's eyes light up because here's this alien doctor and I'm scared and I don't know who this person is, but they're a Boston Bruins fan. And so that personalization, that passion is totally infectious, even though there's nothing to do between emergency medicine and the Boston Bruins.
You know what, David? You have just validated how easy it is for people to suppress their identity just to fit in when they have so much to offer to enable and create and embrace fanocracy.
Right. You know what, Glenn, you know this. People do business with people.
Exactly.
We don't want to do business with a robot. We don't want to do business with a chatbot. We don't want to do business with an algorithm. We want to do business with people. And these ideas are how you can humanize even a big business, even one of the biggest hospitals in the country, in the case of where my daughter works, or even a auto insurance company. And I've got many other examples, but it can be done in all sorts of businesses.
So many opportunities. These are great examples. Now, speaking of examples, David, do you have an example that you can share of an organization or of how an organization can get to know their consumers as individuals and to make sure that that knowledge is actually shared with employees who interact with those consumers?
Right. I love this example. You and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but so many businesses that I do business with, I'm known as a customer number. It's like, all right, you want me to give you my customer number? Sure, I'll give you my customer number. And then the customer services rep pulls up on their screen what products and services you've bought. So I have had a number of opportunities to interact on many different levels with American Airlines. And I've been a customer of American Airlines now for more than 20 years. And I've been the highest level frequent flyer status, which they call executive platinum. I've been an executive platinum traveler for something like 15 years in a row. So I am one of their best customers from the perspective of an individual who flies a lot on American Airlines. The other thing is that I'm also very active on social media. And I've got 120,000 followers on Twitter. I'm DM Scott on Twitter, for example. And sometimes I will tweet about American Airlines. Now, I had an opportunity to have them interact with them many times in their customer support, like their 800 number or through email. And I've also had many times to interact with them on social networks where I might praise them or I might ask a question on social media. Here's the thing that's fascinating about American Airlines, Glenn, is that they have triangulated me and they know that David Meerman Scott with the frequent flyer number of this number is the same David Meerman Scott, whose Twitter ID is DMSCOTT. And I was dumbfounded when I learned this. The only company I've ever done business with that understands that this, what they would call influencer with a large Twitter following, is also our customer, and their customer number is this. I found this so fascinating that I booked a trip to Dallas to meet with the head of social media to learn about how they do this. And in their, they've got a proprietary customer service, or at least at the time they did, software where they've been able to triangulate that. So now, and it's great. Like if I'm having, if I like miss a connection or something, I send them a direct message on Twitter and say, hey, any chance you can get me on AA flight 486? I missed my connection by 10 minutes. And they'll tweet me back in like 5 or 10 minutes and say, sure, go to gate whatever it is, and you can get right on. Because they know me through the Twitter as the same person that they know as having this customer number. So few companies take the time to do that. Most companies, the customer service department knows that this customer is their customer number. And the social media department, usually under marketing, knows that this person is an influencer. They never put them together, but American Airlines does.
Now, how difficult is that?
It's not that difficult. I mean, it's just technology. It's just a computer, but it takes somebody who thinks the way we've been talking about, humanizes the way that they interact. Most companies force you to engage with them in the way they want. They either force you to pick up the phone and call the 800 number, or they force you to use some sort of app, or they force you to send them an email. They basically are molding you as a person into their convenient way of communicating.
Well, David, that's the whole point, right? I mean, in the age of personalization, consumers don't want to be defined by brands anymore. And
so I want to communicate with the companies I do business with in different ways. First of all, I have a super weird schedule. I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I do my exercise. Usually check my emails and social media. I do some exercise, eat something. I'm in my office 7 or 7:30 in the morning. But I also knock off pretty early, and I go to bed at 7:30 at night. I mean, it's a weird schedule. And so if I want to communicate with a company at 4 o'clock in the morning, I want to be able to do that. Now, I'm not suggesting that they're there to answer the phone at 4 in the morning. If they are, that's great. But I am suggesting that some asynchronous way of communicating with them be available. But so many companies say, I'm sorry, you have to call us at such and such a time. And then they stick you on hold. You know, it's like your caller number 486, and it looks like you're going to have to wait another 46 minutes until we can answer your call. I'm like, well, God darn it, why didn't you just give me another way to communicate? So personalization is about how the customer wants to communicate with you, not what's convenient for you.
So well put. And that now takes us to a congratulations, David. Oh. Congratulations on your 8th edition of your international bestseller, The New Rules of Marketing in PR.
Thank you. Yeah, that book first came out in 2007. I've sold 425,000 copies in English. It's in 29 other languages, from Albanian to Vietnamese. So it's kind of cool that book is continuing to live on. It's used in hundreds of universities and thousands of companies as a premier way of doing modern marketing and modern public relations.
Well, it's also a tribute to how your thinking has evolved over time as well. So on that note, what are the new rules and what are the old ones we should start ignoring?
Well, what's interesting is the strategy that I outlined originally in the very first edition back in 2007 that I was writing in 05 and 06 have not changed in any of the editions. It's real simple. The old rules of generating attention were real simple. You had 3 ways to generate attention. You could buy attention by buying advertising, buy ad space in magazines, radio, television, billboards on the side of the road, trade show floor space. You could buy an email list and send it out. Or you could bug people one at a time, which is sales and knocking on doors or calling people on the phone or having a storefront with lots of salespeople in it. Or you could use traditional public relations, and you could beg the media to please write or broadcast about me. Beg, bug, or buy. Those are the three ways that you could generate attention prior to the new rules. Now, I'm not saying that any of that is wrong. I am saying, however, that many companies are saying, you know what, doesn't work so well anymore. An army of salespeople cold calling doesn't work so well. Spending millions and millions of dollars if you're a B2B company on trade show booth space doesn't work so well. Spending millions and millions of dollars if you're a consumer brand on television ads doesn't work so well. Spending a whole bunch of money to hire an expensive public relations agency to pitch the media, maybe that doesn't work so well either. But what does work are the new rules of marketing and PR, and that is that you understand your buyers and you connect with them online by creating a great website, by being active on social media, by engaging with them in real time, the way American Airlines does with me. Those are the new rules. And by the way, they're free or nearly free.
So give us an example of how to implement one of those new rules, because we've seen websites that look good that maybe don't get traffic, or organizations, like you've already said, have all this social media, but they're not using it properly.
Yeah.
Give us an example of how that would work.
So what the biggest mistake I see it again and again and again, almost every single day, is that most organizations are very egotistical in the way they implement their social media and the way they implement their websites. So what they do is they focus on themselves. Here's our product. Here's our service. Here's how we work with you. But the ones that work are the ones that flip that around and instead understand deeply the people that they're trying to reach, and then create the kind of content that will be valuable for them. We already talked about Haggerty Insurance. This is a grain surfboard right here on my left. And nice. Grain Surfboards makes wooden surfboards. So I'll tell you the story about how I'm a surfer. I love it. I'm not very good, but I love it. And I found this company because I was looking through one of my surfing magazines in print, old school surfing magazines. And I read an article about wooden surfboards. And well, that's pretty cool. That touches a bunch of my buttons. I love beautiful wood. I also care about the environment. And I read that traditional way of making surfboards for the last 60 years uses foam core, which is not good for the environment. And furthermore, it's difficult for that surfboard to then be disposed of because it ends up going into landfill and it's not good. And I'm like, I should check out wooden surfboards. So I went online, I typed in wooden surfboards into the search engine. The first thing that popped up was Grain Surfboards. And I was able to learn on their website about them. Turns out they've pioneered a boat building technique to make a light wooden surfboard. Wooden surfboards have been around since surfing was invented in Hawaii several hundred years ago, but they used incredibly huge, super heavy, like 100-pound planks of wood, whereas this surfboard's super light because it's got ribs in it, it's hollow, and they invented the technique to do that. And I was poking around the website. Wow, this is cool. I really like these guys. They have a great Instagram feed. They have great videos. They talk very deeply about the technique for building the board. In fact, they give away their trade secrets right there on the website. Then I learned that you can actually go to York, Maine, and take a surfboard building class with them over 4 days. And I'm like, shoot, I should do that. So within a half an hour of finding Grain Surfboards on the web, I pulled out my credit card and spent $2,000 for a 4-day build your own surfboard course, all because the content that they created was not about them trying to sell surfboards, but about how they could educate someone like me. I call it a buyer persona, but people who are likely to want to do business with them by understanding someone like me and catering to my wants and desires and needs. And furthermore, we talked about this earlier, treating me like a person. And it was great. And I've actually gone up there twice. I've built 2 different surfboards with grain surfboards, and I love them. And they're great people, super cool, interesting artisans up in their factory in York, Maine.
Well, if you want to learn more about that story, it's in Fanocracy. I read that. I loved it. It's incredible how they were able to connect with you almost instantly. I loved it.
It is amazing. It's truly amazing how they've been able to do that. Now, we've talked a little bit about a tiny company. There's half a dozen people at Grain Surfboards. Big companies, like a huge company, American Airlines is one of the biggest companies in the world. We talked a little bit about Hagerty Insurance, or a medium-sized company. And so this can be done, and we talked about a hospital where my daughter works. This can be done by any kind of business. This form of marketing, this idea of connecting and building fans, can be done by any organization.
So David, as we wrap it up, I'd love for you to tackle this final question, especially given what I've heard you talk about already. One thing that jumped at me as in preparing for today is how you've declared that reaching buyers when the moment is right, it only happens when the buyers are ready. How do you advise a company that has a product or service that they believe buyers should be ready for?
It's interesting to me. I'm super lucky because I spent the first part of my career when I first got out of school on a Wall Street bond trading desk. I worked at Dean Witter. I was in the municipal bond department, and I was on a bond trading desk. I didn't like bond trading, but I loved the idea of the real-time information that bond traders used. So I ended up spending 15 years in the real-time financial real-time financial information business. I worked for companies like Dow Jones and Reuters and similar companies, creating real-time news, real-time data that were used by traders and by government agencies to get real-time information. So by the time the web came around in 1995, I had already had a head start in what real-time communications is. And today, real-time communications is everywhere. Twitter is real-time. When you change your status update on Facebook, that's generated in real time. If you change something on your LinkedIn profile, that's generated in real time. If you update your website, that's in real time. And so I believe that one of the biggest mistakes companies are making is they're not operating in real time in the way that they're communicating, the way they're marketing. And so typically the way companies do their marketing is they create a campaign mentality. We're going to work on a campaign to work on this particular product over the next month. And then they map out everything that's going to happen. We're going to have an advertisement here. We're going to send this email newsletter here and do this and this, do this and do this. And I think what works better is to think in real time. How can you create something when the moment is right? I pioneered a technique called newsjacking. And there's a big chapter about newsjacking and the new roles of marketing and PR. Newsjacking is the art and science of injecting your ideas into a breaking news story. So as a news story is breaking, the media and also consumers are looking for somebody who has expertise about that particular area, because that's the moment that it's needed. Now, I'm getting around to answering your question, but I want to do it with a story. So Russell Alexander runs a family law firm in Canada, and he's in the Toronto area. He's got, I think, 4 different offices. I think he employs something like a dozen attorneys. And so he does family law, things like divorce and whatnot. And so he had been growing fairly steadily, but then COVID hit. And he had learned about this idea of newsjacking. He had read my books and he had heard me speak at a conference. So when COVID hit, he said, I'm going to create content about COVID-19 and family law in Canada. He created the COVID-19 and Divorce Information Center on his website. He created YouTube videos. He did a podcast. He created all kinds of great content about the ramifications of COVID-19 and family law. And there were a lot of them. And he was getting questions from people because they would say, hey, I'm a divorced, I'm divorced from my wife. We share custody of a child. My wife is not allowing me to see the child because she's afraid that I'm going to give the child COVID, but I have the right legally to see my child. What does the law say about this? And it was really murky. He put the answers out there. He became the number one resource in the entire country of Canada for COVID-19 and family law. He was quoted in the main newspapers, the Globe and Mail, many times, the magazines, radio stations. CBC was one of their most important television stations, was on frequently for that. He grew by 30% in 1 year. He had to hire 5 new attorneys in order to keep up with demand. That's because he was focused on providing services when the clients needed it, not when he was ready to deliver it. And this is true of any business. If you focus on your buyers and you focus on real time and you look for what's happening in the news, you can figure out ways that you can tie your business to the news cycle. One more quick example. Another example in the Fanocracy book is Duracell batteries. Duracell, the famous battery company, they have what's called Duracell Power Forward. They actually give away free batteries to people in need. And what they do is they have a truck, they actually have several in their fleet, that goes to victims of natural disaster, floods, hurricanes, fires, and they give away free batteries, no obligation. You don't have to sign up. You don't have to give them your personal details. They just give out packs of batteries. What does that do? That builds fans because people remember the power went out. I didn't have any batteries for my flashlight. I wasn't able to power my mobile phone. And here's a battery or here's a charging station you can connect to. And they build tons of fans. They have something like 6 million fans on Facebook. 6 million people love a battery company on Facebook. I spoke with Ramon Bellantini, who's the head of marketing at Duracell. He says that by far the best thing we ever do to market our brand is to give away free batteries to people when they need them. Now, most companies would sell batteries at a steep price hike when there's a natural disaster. Not Duracell. They're giving them away for free. So a couple of different examples of this idea of real-time engagement, idea of newsjacking, the idea of being there when the moment is right, not just when you think you're ready.
You know what you really described right there is the power of what you said at the beginning. It's about the human.
Yeah.
Share what they need. They'll then see the value, and then eventually they'll buy. It's not about the transaction. It's about the need that creates Fanocracy to then drive them back to being loyal. And then over time, they'll buy from you and remain loyal to you. Did I pass the test?
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, I to sum it up, Fanocracy is about making business personal. And not that many companies are making business personal. And it's a competitive advantage right now to make your business personal.
David, you were wonderful. I could talk to you all day. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your insights, and your wisdom. And as we close every show, when you lead in the age of personalization, you will see things that others don't. Do what others won't, and keep pushing when prudence says quit. Thank you, David.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Personalization Outbreak. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. If you enjoyed the content, visit ageofpersonalization.com to check out our free streaming video series and learn how to get involved in the movement. I'm Glenn Yopes. I wish you a good day, and remember, without strategy, change is merely substitution, not evolution. Learn more about City of Hope at cityofhope.org.